What do Yuji's soul punches actually do? Let's talk about it, but spoilers beware. All right, first of all, shout out to Kraft for asking me about this today. And this is a fantastic question because this entire subject is very nebulous. We really don't know the full extent of what this soul punching ability is capable of. But let's break down what we do know. So first of all, Yuji has this ability to strike the soul because he can perceive the contours of the soul. And the reason he can do that is because of his unique situation of sharing a body with Sukuna. Because both Sukuna and his own soul were in one body, he gained this awareness in order to differentiate between his own soul and Sukuna's, which then allowed him to perceive this contour in others as well. Okay, so what exactly does this do? Well, the first time we see it in action in the series, it's against Mahito, where it is uniquely able to help Yuji defeat him. And that's because of Mahito's curse technique, Idol Transfiguration, which he uses to shape his own soul. And as we know, the body follows the shape of the soul, which is why Mahito is able to transform into anything he wants. But in addition to that, he's also able to basically negate or heal damage, depending on how you want to think about it. Because if you strike his arm and cut it off, he can just reshape his soul to have an arm again, essentially negating what you did to him, right? So his physical damage is really only surface level and is meaningless to him. But Yuji, since he can strike directly at Mahito's soul, basically bypasses this defense mechanism of his, allowing him to hurt Mahito when others wouldn't be able to. Then, in addition to that, the only other thing we've seen Yuji do with this ability is strike at the barrier between the souls of an incarnated sorcerer and their vessel. He does this to weaken the hold the incarnated sorcerer has over the vessel. This was the main tenet of their plan in order to free Megami from Sukuna, by continuously striking that barrier and weakening their connection to the point where Sukuna would no longer be able to possess this body. So in both cases, with Mahito and Sukuna, Yuji's punches are just capitalizing on a unique weakness, and we don't know if they would do any extra damage or have any extra effects on a normal person. Enter the Soul Split Katana, where things just get even more complicated, because this blade has the unique ability to strike at the soul itself, essentially ignoring durability. And that sounds a hell of a lot like what Yuji is capable of. So are Yuji's strikes akin to the strikes of this sword? Because if so, we know that you can't heal from the wounds of this sword unless you know how to heal your soul, something that you can only know how to do if you can perceive the contours of the soul. This is why Sukuna, even though he was struck through the heart with the Soul Split Katana, was able to recover from it, because he knows the contours of his own soul thanks to sharing a body with Yuji. So he was able to RCT his own soul from this wound, at least eventually. But so if Yuji's punches or his soul dismantles are exactly like the Soul Split Katana, then that means they cannot be healed from conventionally, right? You would need to know the contour of your own soul in order to heal from his strikes. And there doesn't seem to be any implication of that throughout the entire series, right? Like, Yuji has had this soul ability since almost the beginning of the manga, and yet there was never once a spotlight shined on this aspect of his combat. Not once was anyone like, I tried to heal and like, I can't for some reason. You know what I mean? And so it seems as if maybe his punches don't quite operate the exact same as the Soul Split Katana. So this may just point to a fundamental difference in how Yuji's strikes operate versus how the Soul Split Katana operates. We could think of both as bypassing durability, but Yuji just does so to damage the soul, whereas the Soul Split Katana might actually have the ability to shape the soul and not change it the same way Mahito does with Idol Transfiguration. But let's say the Soul Split Katana chops off your arm, your soul now has no arm either, right? Whereas compared to Yuji, if he punches you in the arm, he's just bypassing your durability and striking directly at your soul, but he's not changing your soul. So your soul still has an arm, it's just damaged now. So that would check out to me, honestly, but then this gets a step more complicated because Yuji does have the shrine technique, and we know that through a binding vow, he was able to specifically slice the soul with Dismantle. But in particular, he used that to strike between the barrier of Sukuna and Megami's soul. Again, because that was the objective, to strip Sukuna away from Megami. Could Yuji have theoretically used a binding vow with the soul dismantle to exactly replicate the soul split katana? And let's say he dismantled off your arm with a soul dismantle. Would that then cut off the arm of your soul and be unhealable unless you knew the contours of the soul? Maybe, and I think that would make sense. And maybe Yuji could do that, but didn't because the objective was to split Sukuna and Megami. Or maybe it's a level of sophistication that he doesn't have yet, but could be capable of. So like I said at the start of this video, this is just a very nebulous subject. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what Yuji is capable of with this ability, because the only times we see him use it in the series are in these extremely unique circumstances, like with Mahito and Sukuna, right? We never see him do a soul punch that affects anybody more than normal ever, right? Which makes me think it doesn't do anything except for in these unique circumstances. Now, could it theoretically be used, again, if he was more skilled to maybe emulate the soul split katana? Maybe, but I think Sukuna not doing that is a big reason to think it can't be used that way. Because Sukuna has this ability as well, right? Because he shared a body with Yuji. That was why he was able to heal his soul split katana heart. So if Sukuna has the ability to cast a soul dismantle that cannot be healed with regular RCT, why didn't he use that against Gojo or against any of the other people afterwards, right? And to me, it's, well, maybe that's not possible. Maybe this soul perception ability is only useful in these unique circumstances. But it's hard to say for sure. That was a whole lot of yap. So to circle us back around to the original prompt here, what exactly do Yuji's soul punches do to non-reincarnated sorcerers? I would say that it seems like they don't do anything. Now, could they theoretically? Maybe, but there's no evidence of that in the series. And then Crash had a follow-up question to all of this, which was, is Yuji not able to perceive the soul outside of his own body? Because if he could, then why didn't he pass that ability on to Yuta and Kusakabe when he body swapped with them? And it's really impossible to say whether or not Yuji retained that when he was within Yuta or Kusakabe's body, but even if he did, I don't think that's something that you could pass on per se, because it came as a result of sharing a body with two souls, right? So Yuji has that ability from his time with Sukuna. Him just being in Yuta's or Kusakabe's body, he's still just one soul in there, right? So they're not really gaining that same experience from him. And even if he does retain that ability in their bodies, like that's still just his own perception, right? He's not leaving that behind when he swaps back. It's not really something, at least in how I'm understanding it, that could be absorbed in that way. You would very specifically need that same experience of being one of two souls within the same body. And then actually on this exact same subject, EDG Bara asked me, could we have soul swapped somebody, like Gojo for example, with Angel, somebody who is sharing a body with two souls just like Yuji and Sukuna? And if they had done that, would Gojo have gained this soul perception ability? And it certainly seems possible, right? But there are a bunch of variables there that is kind of hard to speculate on, because how would a soul swap with a double-souled body work? Like, could you just choose to swap with either one? Like, could we be like, all right, I want to swap Gojo with Angel, or would it have to be with Hana, right? But again, assuming it would work, like let's say we put Hana in Gojo's body and Gojo in Hana's body, so now Gojo and Angel are both in Hana's body, I think then theoretically, given enough time at least, he would develop that ability. But who knows how long it takes to achieve that. I would imagine it's not just like an instantaneous thing. And then there's also something to consider in like Yuji and Sukuna's unique bond, and that they do share DNA, you know, they are related. Could that have played any role in the development of this ability? Not necessarily, but maybe, right? Because we do know that no other incarnated sorcerer seems to speak of this ability, but in the cases of like a Kashimo or, you know, a Ryu or a Uro or whoever, they just instantly took over their vessel, right? They didn't actually like share with them. So they probably wouldn't develop the ability. But if anyone, Angel and Hana would be a prime candidate. And they never spoke to having this ability, but maybe it was just not relevant, right? So it's hard to say, but I would say that it's at least possible. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Let me know y'all's yap down below, and thanks for watching.